Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ark. Last year, on the night of the 2020 Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, I had a disturbing dream. As I was just beginning to slip beneath the surface of sleep, I dreamt that I was staring into a dusty, full-length mirror. Behind me, in the mirror, stood a tall, lanky figure with wrinkled red skin and antlers which reached to the ceiling. His face was expressionless, and his eyes were completely white and unblinking. I woke up and rolled over to find the shadow of my chair stretching up the wall and ceiling, standing over me just where the figure in my dream had been. This figure continued to appear in my dreams and half-dreaming states for several weeks. He would stand over me, staring, silent. Then I didn't dream of him again until the summer, when I had the following dream. I was in a dark wood, and I came upon a tall, emaciated creature with red skin and antlers. I thought him to be Satan, and I was afraid. But then I heard a horn sounding in the distance. Flowers and greenery began to sprout up all over the body of the demon. The darkness dissipated, and the wood was transformed into a lush forest full of sound and life. Animals gathered in the now green clearing around the woodland god, who was no longer emaciated and hunched, but stood tall and proud. In this final dream about the stag demon, Satan took on the form of a nature god, like the classical god Pan. Pan is a god of the wild, of flocks and herds, of rustic music and revelry. He is associated with nature and fertility, and often pictured playing pipes or chasing after nymphs. Half goat, half man, Pan represents the primal drives, the unrestrained. From his name we get the words panic and pandemonium. The picture which we receive of Satan has been heavily influenced by Pan and other nature gods which were demonized during the Christian conversion of Europe. With this in mind, I believe the meaning of the dream becomes clear. The instincts and the body were called death and sin by the Christians. The passions and desires were called Satan, the adversary. They were cast out of heaven, out of the halls of consciousness, and cast into the abyss, repressed into the unconscious. There, in the inferno, the instincts have suffered endless tortures. They have atrophied. They have become twisted and resentful. But now, at the sound of the horn, Satan returns again to his primal form, and the instincts are restored to their natural state. The dark wood, reminiscent of the opening lines of Dante's Inferno, where he finds himself lost and wandering towards hell, blossom again with new life. The gates of the Inferno are opened, and the host of fallen angels, the demonized classical gods, are redeemed. Thinking of the classical gods as fallen angels or renouncing them as demons is quite common in Christian thought. In Paradise Lost, Milton outright names the fallen angels as various Roman, Greek, Babylonian, and Egyptian gods, and describes Satan's host with the language of classical heroism. In Book 1 of Paradise Lost, he writes, "A forest huge of spears and thronging helms appeared, and serried shields in thick array. Of depths immeasurable, anon they move, in perfect phalanx, to the Dorian mood, of flutes and soft recorders, such as raised, to height of noblest temper, heroes old, arming to battle." Milton also describes the city which the fallen angels build in the abyss, called Pandemonium, as a classical temple or palace. Since Paradise Lost is set before history, Milton is setting up all of classical culture as being built by and derived from the fallen angels. Their gods, their phalanxes, their architecture, their music, all demonic. Yet Milton portrays the classical gods as noble, though fallen, something which cannot be said for the long tradition of the demonization and persecution of the native Indo-European gods of Europe. Milton's sympathy for the classical gods can be seen in his poem On the Morning of Christ's Nativity, where he describes the classical gods fleeing into the wilderness as Christ is born, a mournful, bittersweet image. One might posit that Milton's portrayal of the fallen angels as noble, and his interest in Satan as a sympathetic character, was a step towards their redemption. William Blake noticed Milton's sympathy for Satan. In The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, Blake wrote, "Those who restrain desire do so because theirs is weak enough to be restrained, and the restrainer, or reason, usurps its place and governs the unwilling, and being restrained, it by degrees becomes passive, till it is only the shadow of desire." The history of this is written in Paradise Lost, and the governor, or reason, is called the Messiah. He continues, "It indeed appeared to reason as if desire was cast out, but the devil's account is that the Messiah fell and formed a heaven of what he stole from the abyss." Blake concludes this passage by saying, "The reason Milton wrote in fetters when he wrote of angels and God, and at liberty when of devils and hell, is because he was a true poet, and of the devil's party without knowing it." Here Blake presents the interesting idea that from the devil's perspective, the anti-Christian perspective, it was the Logos which rebelled, fell, and formed a heaven of what it stole from the abyss. In this conception, it was the Logos which rebelled against the body, against the chaotic, colorful harmony of the instincts, and which formed a perfect ideal world, a supposed heaven for the righteous and the meek. This ideal world was created and promoted by those who could not handle the harshness and cruelty of reality, who could not deal with the fact that pain, suffering, death, misfortune, and subjugation are part of existence, and who could not stand that they were the subjugated and misfortunate. Thus they began their crusade against the body, against the instincts, the life-affirming instincts, and even against death and suffering itself, and called all this evil, while their ideal world of peace and freedom from suffering they called good. Thus, when the Logos rebelled against the other instincts, it created a heaven of itself and a hell of the body, and so the body and the psyche were set against each other. Carl Jung recognized the neuroticism of this unnatural perspective, writing, "The separation of psychology from the premises of biology is purely artificial, because the human psyche lives in indissoluble union with the body." Jung believed that the repression and demonization of the primal instincts caused the world wars in Europe. Jung thought that to avoid further bloodshed, we needed to reintegrate the repressed contents of the unconscious into consciousness. We could also take the devil's perspective on this issue, as Blake described it. It is the Logos, reason, rationality, which rebelled and which needs to be reintegrated into the body, not the other way around. But either way, the essential issue is the same. We must redeem the demonized instincts and reconcile them with the rational portion of our consciousness. However, the carnage and horror of the world wars caused just another, more violent crusade against the instincts, against anything perceived as hostile, violent, passionate, and volatile. And the rift has only gotten worse, the persecution of the body and the instincts more violent and malicious. We now preach safety, equality, passivity above all else. But to sterilize the instincts is to kill the creative principle in us, the very principle of life. Jung wrote, "From the living fountain of the instincts flows everything that is creative. Hence the unconscious is not merely conditioned by history, but is the very source of the creative impulse. It is like nature herself, prodigiously conservative and yet transcending her own historical conditions in her acts of creation. We need the instincts. The instincts are the root of life. Without the chaos of the instincts and passions in our chest, we become docile, weak-willed creatures. Without passion and desire, fury and frenzy, we lose what it means to be human, to be a vessel for nature's will. Life withers and dies when the will turns against the instincts, when the instincts antagonize and afflict. Life thrives when the instincts and will are one, when the instincts uplift and redeem. As Nietzsche wrote, So long as life is ascending, happiness and the instincts are one. It is no surprise that Nietzsche admired the religion, morality, and creative spirit of the classical Greeks and Romans. Nietzsche believed that the greatest affliction which humanity has suffered is the development of anti-instinctual moralities such as Christianity and all the modern ideologies which have inherited its nihilism and hatred for the body. He warned that our greatest danger is the possibility of us becoming domesticated and tame and losing the chaos of our instincts. In Thus Spake Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "I say unto you, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. I say unto you, you still have chaos in yourselves. But alas, the time is coming when man will no longer give birth to a star." To reclaim the instincts is to rekindle the chaos and dynamism of the classical world in yourself, but this time without projecting all the energy and passion of the instincts onto the heavens, or perhaps, in our case, into the internet. Not being helplessly at their mercy, as the Greeks imagined themselves to be, but internalizing them so that you glow and give light. For as Blake wrote in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, "He whose face gives no light shall never become a star." To reclaim the instincts is to regain the chaos of the unconscious and let it fill you up until you are bursting with passion, with energy, with light, until you can say, "I am a dancing star." The other night I had a dream, a flash of several successive images. A lone horse stood on a vast, grassy plain, its black coat rippling in the wind. Stars stretched across an inky sky, forming the body of a dragon. Christ descended into the flames of hell with a key in hand. He was going down to unlock the gates of Tartarus. A man stood on a beach facing the ocean. The blood of sacrificed bulls streamed into the surf, turning it pink. The man stared out at the golden dawn, which spilled over the horizon and onto the gray waves. He was waiting for the sun.